blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew Podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
Have you joined the CoCo Crew yet? All right, well, I know you have, or you wouldn't be here. Welcome to episode 39 of the CoCo Crew Podcast, your premier provider of CoCo news and information in the modern day. We, of course, joined by all our normal hosts this time. I am John Linville. Also joining me is Mr. Neil Blanchard. Hello, Neil.
Hello, John, and everyone listening.
Hello, Mike Rowan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 39.
All right. And, of course, hello, Mr. Boise Pete.
CoCo forever.
CoCo forever. All right. Very good. Well, it's coming down, getting to the end of summer. We're all going to have to get back into our fall routines. Many of us will have kids going back to school. I personally just this past week dropped my oldest off at college for the first time, so that's a big change. And next week, the middle one will be driving the youngest one to high school. So it's the first time my wife is not going to have to do school drop-off on a regular basis in, I don't know, 15 years, 14 years, something like that. Anyway, so that should be interesting. She still has to do a little pickup once in a while, I think. But big changes around. But, you know, one thing that never changes in our steady lives is our love for the Tandy Color Computer. So how's everyone doing? What you been up to? You been busy? So let's see. I see Tandy Assembly is about 2 months away. So I know our Tandy Assembly planners are feverishly working on that. CoCo Fest is 8 months away, so our CoCo Fest planners are yawning and stretching. Getting ready there. Well, I'm still working on my my compiler for the MC10, getting pretty close to matching at least the integer parts of what the Microcolor Basic offers. Not quite there, and still missing the string manipulation stuff, but it's getting there. Having a lot of fun with that. It's going to be cool. And did a little test the other day with what's called the sieve of Aristines, which is an integer-only program that calculates prime numbers using. It doesn't do any multiplication or division. It just uses addition. Anyway, I ran it in Microcolor Basic, the interpreter, and took 57 seconds, I think it was. Then I took the exact same source and compiled it and ran that, and that took 19 seconds. No, 3 seconds. So it's 2.9 seconds, I think. Yeah. It was about a 20-fold or 19-fold improvement. So, yeah, it must be 1.9, something like that, in 2 seconds. Anyone else doing anything
awesome.
cool? Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, you're making good progress on that. That's going to be really awesome. I'm glad you're doing this.
Yep. So like I said, I'm pretty close. I'm close to adding the few graphics features that are in the Microcolor Basic. And I'm going to have to implement the strings, which is a little more trouble than I thought it was going to be, but it's mostly just because it gets its fingers down and into the parser a lot more, because all the stuff in the parser that is set up to say, oh, you might have a variable here, is kind of built right now to assume you might have an integer variable here, so I'll have to do something different if it's a string variable, that sort of thing. So that's pretty much what I've been up to, along with work and life or whatever. How about any acquisitions? Anybody bought anything cool on eBay?
Yeah, I picked up a copy of Lyra, the original MIDI software from Speech Systems.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so
Well, that's
to add
cool.
to the collection, have a nice original with the computer.
Where'd you find that?
That was on eBay.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah. And
That's cool. Yeah.
This wasn't eBay, but I was at Goodwill, and I found a 1959 copy of Direct Current Fundamentals from Delmar.
Oh, wow.
So
That's cool.
that was, yeah, well, that was worth the 99 cents.
Oh, that's a
Did you
bargain.
say Delmar
Yes,
from the 1950s?
yes.
Because there was a company called Delmar Systems that sold
Right,
68K machines in the 80s. That's not the same Delmar though, right?
No, I don't
Yeah,
think it is.
yeah.
I doubt there's any connection, but yeah,
Yeah.
that didn't
It's interesting that the
pass
name
me either.
is
I used to see those systems in 68 Microjournal all the time.
Yeah, Ed Gressick from Delaware was the guy that
Mm-hmm.
was responsible for that company. Anyway, just the name certainly rings a bell, but probably a different company, I'm sure.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm looking back through my eBay history. I can remember I bought a few things here and there. Probably the coolest thing that I bought, I actually got a package deal on some Dick Smith VZ300 stuff all the way from Australia, which
Wow.
I already had the computers and some software. This included some manuals, but most important, it included the disk controller and the disk drive. And so I actually should be able to run disk software on my VZ200, VZ300 now. I don't know if there is any, but so that's for those that aren't aware. That's it's sort of like a color computer. It's an analogous machine, but instead of the 6809, it has a Z80, but it has the 6847 video chip in there. So kind of a cousin, a weird cousin of the CoCo. All right. Well, anyway, anyone else got any eBay acquisitions? Anything? No. All right. Well, then we'll just use that as our introduction. We'll take a little break, and then we'll be back with some announcements.
What's going on, CoCo Cruisers? The original gamer Stevie Stroh here, and I'm the host of CoCo Talk. What is CoCo Talk, you ask? Well, we are a weekly live talk show on YouTube featuring the Tandy Color computer. And guess what? CoCo Talk is now also available as an audio podcast for your listening pleasure. So when you are done listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, come check us out at cocotalk.live for weekly live talk featuring the Tandy Color computer. We'll see you there, CoCo Cruisers.
Okay. And now we're back with some announcements. You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are available on Twitter as at CoCo Crew Podcast. That's at CoCoCrewPodcast. If you like to send tweets, send one our way. We don't get that many. It's good to have feedback over on Twitter. We also have a Facebook page that is called the Space CoCo Space Crew Space Podcast. If you're not already on the page, be sure to look for it on Facebook and give us a like. The CoCo Crew Podcast is available through iTunes and Google Play for downloading, and of course available through Stitcher and TuneIn for streaming. So if you're missing our lovely voices, just say, Alexa, play the CoCo Crew Podcast, and she will do your bidding. We are, of course, a member of the Throwback Network. This is a collection of retro-themed podcasts, the variety of topics, many of which are technology or gaming related. So when you're done listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, be sure and if you're still looking for more podcast time, then be sure to check out the Throwback Network. We are also a member of the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This is also a list of similarly themed podcasts. In this case, all of them technology or gaming related, as you can tell by the name. So again, if you are looking for more podcast time, then check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by Cyber Ears. If you are looking for a rock-solid host for your audio content, then we recommend that you check out Cyber Ears, where you will get your audio on your terms. If you want to reach out and touch, so to speak, the host of the CoCo Crew Podcast, you can do so via email. We have some addresses set up. You can use any of these to reach all the hosts. That's show, SHOW, at CoCoCrew.org, podcast@cococrew.org or feedback@cococrew.org. And if you want to reach one of the hosts individually, then I'm available as John, John, at cococrew.org. Neil is available as Neil, Neil, at cococrew.org. Myro is available as Mike, Mike, at cococrew.org. I should give him another alias for Myro at cococrew.org. And, of course, Boise is available as Boise, Boisy, at cococrew.org. Those are our standard announcements. Now we'd like to make a few announcements about upcoming events that we think might be of interest to our listening audience. I'm going to take a moment here just to mention the Retro Challenge. Longtime listeners will have heard me mention this before. I am actually the organizer now of the Retro Challenge. The Retro Challenge is a twice-a-year event where for a month you have an excuse to go out and do whatever you want to with your retro computers, and you blog about it. As part of the contest, I'll come through and make comments and try to judge a winner at the end. Although I didn't actually name a winner last time. Hope to do better this time. And sometimes there's even prizes, so to speak. They're more like tokens. But anyway, it's a fun event. It's kind of cool. You get other people doing weird stuff and blogging about it. You can learn things. You can be entertained by it. You can be inspired by it. So the schedule has been, for a while, has been in March and October, but those months weren't working very well for me. No, April and October, yeah. April and October. So I've moved the next event up to September, and then that'll be followed to next March, so it'll be March and September. So a little change of schedule, but it's a cool event. Come and check it out, retrochallenge.org. You have until the 1st of September. Send me your proposal for your entry, and I'll get it on the website, and we'll be off to the races. Beyond that, talking about events that actually happen in real life, the next big one, September 15th and 16th of 2018, will be VCF Midwest 2018. I had hoped to go to this one. I hemmed and hawed, and then I wimped out. So I'm not going to be there, but I understand that Mike and Neil will be going. Is that right, fellas?
I'm going, yeah.
That's correct.
All right. And I understand there'll be some other CoCo folks there, and, of course, plenty of Tandy and other folks in the venue. So if you are in the Chicago area or reasonable drives nearby, then I suggest you figure out a way to get to Chicago at Elk Grove Village, Illinois there, September 15th and 16th. Following that, or coming up after that, October 19th to 20th, 2018 in Portland, the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. I've never been to this event. I hear great things. The website looks cool. A lot of gaming stuff. I see the website. They show a couple of rows of arcade machines. I know they do a lot of home console gaming. I'm not sure how much 8-bit or whatever computers there are, but I suspect if you like listening to this kind of podcast, you're probably into some gaming too. So you may want to check it out. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest part of the United States in October, the third week of October, then for the 19th and 20th, I recommend you get to Portland Retro Gaming Expo. All right. So again, if you're in the Chicago area on the 10th of November, we have the Chicago TI International World Fair. So if you're a fan of TI computers, that'll be the TI 99. Then this is the event for you. Haven't been to it. I've heard some good things about it, but I don't know a lot about it. But here it is, November 10th, Chicago TI Users Group. There's a link to the website. I'm not sure the exact location. But it doesn't matter because really, if you're that close November 10th, then you can probably make it over to Springfield, Ohio for Tandy Assembly. And, of course, that is our big event for the fall, Tandy Assembly. You go check out Tandy computers of all stripes, color computers, the Model 1, 3s, and 4s, the Models 2, 12, 16, 6000s, pocket computers, the Tandy 1000s, whatever you got, whatever you want to find. I'm sure there'll be some of it there.
And there might even be a Tandy Sensation.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that'd be cool. I know there's going to be a presentation on the model, the 600.
Oh, wow,
The
really?
600. Yeah, and there'll be several there on display. Our keynote speaker is going to be Stuart Chaffee of the Computer Chronicles. So if you are familiar with that
awesome.
show was on PBS throughout the 80s, he is going to be our Saturday keynote speaker. You don't want to miss that. It's going to be a great time. Expecting a good turnout. We're in a new, bigger, nicer space in Springfield, Ohio. So come see us in Tandy Assembly.
That should be very cool. All right. Good news, good news. Okay, well, moving on. December 2018, I've got World of Commodore. I still don't see a formal announcement, but it's sort of here just because it always has been.
It's going to happen.
Let's hope so. Anyway, it looks like they announced it in 2017, all the way through September. So maybe next month we'll have an actual announcement.
That's on Christmas Eve, right?
So World of Commodore. Just about. So that's the Toronto Pet Users Group. If you're into Commodores, if you're in Canada, put them together. It's probably a great place to be. So rolling around to the 2019, we of course have CoCo Fest 2019, going to be May 4th and 5th. This of course is the big event that traditionally has been in the CoCo community for forever. We're looking forward to the next one. Should be a cool event. I know we're all planning to go and be there. That'll be at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois. Make your plans now. One more here. They have announced the dates for the next Kansas Fest. That's the Big Apple II event where everybody goes to summer camp at Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. That'll be July 15th to 21st of 2019. They also have some videos up from this year's event if you want to go and check those out. Anyway, it is an Apple II event, but, you know, it watches off. So they're pretty nice folks. All right. Well, those are our announcements for this month. So we're going to take another little break, and then we'll be back with some news.
Hi, I'm Mike Rowan, president of TA Vintage Events, and I would like to personally invite you to Tandy Assembly. Tandy Assembly is North America's only vintage computer show exclusively for all makes and models of Tandy and Radio Shack computers. This year's event is being held in Springfield, Ohio, just 30 minutes from Dayton International Airport. Last year's inaugural show was fantastic, thanks to everyone's donations and attendance. This year will be even bigger and better. Our keynote speaker will be Stuart Chaffee, host of TV's The Computer Chronicles. Event and hotel information are available at our website, tandyassembly.com. Registration is just $10 per person. Children 12 and under are free. And as always, you can register and pay online. So come join the fun at Tandy Assembly, November 10th and 11th in Springfield, Ohio. Tandy Assembly. Some assembly is required.
All right, CoCo Cruisers. Now we're back with some news. First item, we have a video from Mr. Jim Gary called Soul Chess. It looks kind of cool because it's like a solo version of chess, but it's on like a 4x4 board. If you're a chess aficionado or you like to play around with different moves or whatever, maybe you're trying to learn how the different pieces move.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It might be a little way to do it. It looks pretty good. Very cool.
Yeah, it gives you just little strategy situations. Interesting game.
All right, so moving on. We've got an article from Gamma Sutra, and the title is a little interesting. It says, Meeting the Dev Making His First DOS Game in 2018. And so it's DOS, of course, but, you know, since that's kind of retro. So this is David Murray, which I think is the same as the 8-bit guy on YouTube that and a while back he did some retro breading or something, or painted. I think he painted a CoCo and people got a little mad about it or something. I don't know, maybe you remember that. Anyway, I think it's the same guy, but he's done some sort of Kickstarter. He's doing development of a DOS game, and they raised like $100,000 on Kickstarter for a DOS game.
Golly.
Like, that's pretty impressive. So if somebody would pay me $100,000, I might take a year off to write a DOS game too. Anyway, can't afford the pay cut or whatever, but for a labor of love.
It's a lot more than I was going to offer you for that one game there.
Oh Lord. Yeah, you might actually could survive on that, but anyway, I just need to figure out a way to turn that into, year after year after year. That might be fun. Oh well. Well, anyway, check it out. Check out the story on Gamasutra. And I think like I said, I think it's the 8-bit guy on YouTube. He's talking about sold 2,000 copies. I guess he sold them for about $50 a piece. That'd be $100, 100,000. Oh, it's good work if you can get it, right? Might want to check out his YouTube videos. He does some decent stuff. And I'm jealous, by the way, just on the side here, the 8-bit guy, if you look at his videos, like every month he does just a single video that's about 20 minutes of an unboxing where all his listeners just send him stuff, and he opens the box and then, takes out some rare piece of 8-bit computing gear or whatever, and then sort of winks and nods and promises to eventually do a video of it, and I'm sure he does some of them. But I'm just wondering, do I need to put up a P.O. box or what? I mean, somebody needs to send me some stuff. For us. Sorry, send us some stuff.
Yeah, you're so good on camera, John, you just have to get that front lighting up a little bit.
Oh, is that it? Maybe so. Yeah, well, oh well.
Shadow Man.
Don't talk about Shadow Man around the Red Hat folks these days. There's some internal reasons that we're grumpy about that right now. Anyway, all right, moving on. Our next item, let's see, this is from Paulo Silva, he's posting on the 6502 Facebook group. Anyway, he says, hopefully soon, Boreal's ZX Basic Compiler, which is basically some free software for a basic compiler, will be extended to 6502 based hardware. So I guess it's a basic compiler that originally targets like the ZX Spectrum, and now he's moving it to 6502. Kind of interesting just in and of itself on that, but then since it parallels the project I've been working on, I figured why not throw in the news. So, Pile Basic is that's all the rage these days. Maybe that's just the single step it takes to get a few more people programming to overcome the it's too hard to learn assembly.
All right, our next one is from Richard Lorbieski. He's well known, I guess, in the CoCo community. He's on Facebook, and I think I don't know if he does any posts on the list. But anyways, he's introducing a new product he's come up with. It's a 2 meg memory expansion for the Color Computer 3 from his company called Boyzentech, and it's called the Boomerang E2 with Guardian Plus CPU protection board.
Yep, so basically a 2 meg memory upgrade as long as you have both pieces, because the CPU DAT boards extensions are done on the Guardian board, which is plugs in where the CPU plugs in.
That's correct.
Kind of cool. It's not a bad price. A lot of people have been getting them. Seem to be happy with them.
There's also a jumper on there to disable it to 512K, 2 meg, so you can run it either way.
Yeah,
I think he mentioned there were some Sierra games that'll freak out, so that's why that jumper's there. So definitely great if you're an OS 9 user.
Yep.
Our next news item is from Ed Snyder, also known as Zippy. He's releasing a new MPI project called the 4-slot MPI. And this MPI also it has 4 slots, but it also has other expansion on it, or extra features, I should say, like an OPL 3 sound chip, and I think it has dual high-speed UARTs.
Yeah, 2 serial ports.
Yeah,
2 serial ports. They're a different chip than what came on like the deluxe RS-232 pack. So you need some software for that. I'm sure the Nitrous 9 folks will take care of that. He's posted some clips too with that audio chip. Some of the chip tunes that he's got running on there sound pretty nice. Hoping to see a game come out for it, but we'll see. Very exciting.
All right, our next news item is from Nathan Bird. I think that's how you pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
And he's announcing DriveWire development updated.
Yeah, so this is one of you get people kind of pop up every once in a while, and they've been working on something. They've finally come out of stealth mode. I think that's kind of the case here. He's been going with improvements to the DriveWire server. Announced that he's been doing some work, so that's cool. And hopefully he'll continue and iron out some of the problems people complain about with the Java. Basically, just update it to a more modern set of stuff. Like he said, that RxTX library that a lot of people had trouble getting for their systems or whatever, there's a new replacement for that. So maybe he can use that instead. Hopefully that'll be more compatible. That sort of stuff. Modernize it. I think that'll be good. Very good, Nathan. Thank you.
Guess who has a MIDI to MML converter? What's this about, John?
For those that aren't aware, a lot of people know what MIDI is, or know at least know it's related to music. So MML, I think it stands for Macro Music Language, or one of those that kind of created a name for it long afterwards. But so it's basically the syntax of the play command in Microsoft Basic, or Color Basic. It showed up in a variety of Microsoft Basics or whatever, and then a few other places have adopted it. And so it almost has a life of its own now. What he's got here is a converter of one format of music to another format of music, which is cool. But then once you have it in MML, I think it's fairly easy to then maybe translate into a play command for Basic, or I think this is basically the music macro language. It's basically the same language that Alan Huffman was talking about earlier in the year, where he was where he was passing strings down to his search sound or whatever. So anyway, it's just news. It's a way to gather some content from the various MIDI files available in the world and convert them into some data that might be useful on a CoCo.
That's actually pretty cool. You can take something that's really not really readable and turn it into a string that you can pass into a program and play.
Yep.
Cool.
Very cool.
All right, the next news item is tribute to Portal in development for the Commodore 64. Apparently there is a game called Portal. I've never played it. I'm not a big gamer, but someone is actually making it for the C64. Cool.
Yeah, so I'm sure Neil's probably familiar with the old Portal. I think it was on the Xbox. And I don't know how faithful this is to that graphically speaking, but it looks like sort of the same idea of being able to create these apertures and move through them to solve puzzles. Yeah, if you watch the video, it's kind of cool to watch, but it doesn't look like, it looks like something that could be done on a CoCo. So this is, as people like to make fun of me for saying, this is not a CoCo project, but it could be. So it's just sort of an inspirational, show people what can be done, what should be in their crosshairs if they're looking for a project.
Cool. All right, then the next news item is Learn 6502 Assembly by Fedor Steeman. So this looks like a link to an Android app where you can learn how to, I guess, program in 6502 assembly.
Yeah. Yeah, and then what he says is that, there should be a 6809 version. So that's kind of what it's posted here for, is like, well, I mean, if people are learning 6502 assembly with their Android phones, then there's no reason they couldn't learn 6809 with their Android phones, right? Just inspirational.
Be great if you're commuting on the train or something. You just take your phone out and say, let me learn some assembly.
Yeah, exactly.
The next one is New Atari 800 Computer Handheld by Ben Heck. And this is pretty cool. It's actually a handheld, and if you're familiar with Ben Heck, this is the kind of stuff he does all the time. But it's a complete Atari 800. It's probably about 5 by 5 inches, 6 inches square. He's got the full keyboard on it, and it has a full, complete resolution color LCD screen built into it. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So it kind of looks maybe like a double wide original Game Boy in terms of size. Yeah. But yeah, he built it. It basically designed a new motherboard around the Atari 800 chipset. Included here, it's interesting, and like you said, he's done a lot of these kind of projects. But also, just to note that apparently this is his last project, or at least the last project for what's been known as the Ben Heck Show. So I'm not really sure why he decided to quit doing his show or what he's moving on to or whatever. He's been a YouTuber for, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, doing these kind of projects and various kind of hacks. Some of them retro-oriented, some of them dumb, but a lot of them kind of cool. And he not only, he does, he'll build up, like he builds these cases. So, he'll use a laser cutter or a 3D printer or a CNC machine or all three sometimes, building these cases together, and then do some electronics and some programming, some microcontroller stuff. Anyway, you're probably familiar with him already if you're listening to the show, but if you're not, go and at least check his back catalog for some cool episodes. Very cool.
And our next story, also in the Atari 800 realm here, the incredible Atari 800 XL case restoration. That's by Tom Marty at Hackaday, and he successfully restores a very this 800 XL case is eaten away completely, and
I mean, it looks like it's been run over by a truck.
And he ends up creating a wire framework, almost like rebar, to build complete the missing parts of the back case, and it came out looking really nice. So it's definitely fun to watch.
Yeah, very cool. It's kind of amazing how much you can do if you're really dedicated, right? If you really want to do that. It's hard to imagine somebody putting that much effort into restoring a CoCo. Maybe someday they will.
As they become more rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Indeed. One day, this isn't a CoCo project, but it could be.
It might be, right?
That's right. I'm just looking at these photos here, and this is unbelievable. Wow. It's a lot of work involved in this. Really involved. Lots of maker skills involved to do that.
Definitely.
You can always find back-to-school value and selection at your local Radio Shack store. Save now on our wide range of popular calculators. Our children's learning calculator is just $10.95. Or how about the solar-powered EC401 calculator? It never needs batteries, and it's on sale now for just $22.95. For older students, the EC499 full scientific calculator features 50 functions for just $34.95. Off to college this fall? Our famous realistic Minimus 7 speakers offer big sound in a small space. They're less than 8 inches high, but deliver up to 40 watts of big, rich sound. On sale for just $39.95 each. And for education and entertainment for the entire family, it's the TRS-80 Color Computer. Learn to write your own programs or choose from a large library of plug-in program packs. The Color Computer comes with 4,000 characters of internal memory, 8 colors, and a built-in RS-232 interface for easy communication ability. The Color Computer is specially priced at just $359. That's $40 off the catalog price. For these back-to-school specials and others, be sure to visit your local Radio Shack store. Radio Shack, a Tandy company. Our next one is from the well-known Refilled. It is CoCo to Dragon, and I believe this, I don't know if I was understanding this correctly or not, but it sounds like I know it's a bunch of cassette files for the Dragon 32. I'm guessing these are CoCo games that have been patched to run on the Dragon.
Well, so actually, it's kind of the backwards. He's taking kind of a novel approach, I think, to trying to resolve some compatibility between the Dragon and CoCo. So the Dragon and CoCo are basically the same hardware, at least the CoCo 1 and 2. The only real difference is the keyboard matrix. There's a variation. So, all right. So, like if you write an assembly language program that, if it uses the predefined, check for character on the keyboard ROM call, it could actually work between the CoCo and the Dragon unchanged. But of course, most people didn't do that, right? They either wrote their own, or maybe they made a direct call to somewhere in the ROM, bypassing the indirect call, right? But in this case, he's got a Dragon ROM, but the Dragon ROM routines are patched to handle the CoCo matrix, And so, if you have a program that runs on the Dragon and it makes a ROM call to read the keyboard, but bypasses, the indirect call, just makes the direct ROM call, it will enable it to work. Now, if they're reading it themselves, it's still not going to work. But if they make the ROM call to read it, so this is like another little step towards being compatible between the CoCo and the Dragon. So then he goes on and runs a bunch of Dragon software on his CoCo, much of which works anyway, right? Because it only needs a joystick or whatever. But it's probably not the whole Dragon library by any means, but it probably extends to the library of Dragon stuff that'll run on the CoCo. I thought it was a neat idea. He goes on from there, and he collects a bunch of stuff, and he creates an STC image for running the CoCo STC on the Dragon with some of this Dragon software, which I guess this is actually running it on the Dragon. So this is a little bit different. First news item, but sort of related. So Mr. Reedville's been dabbling in Dragon stuff, is basically what it amounts to. So he has this one where he's created an STC card image for the Dragon. He was offering to let somebody host it. I'm not sure if he got anybody on the hook to host it for downloads, but maybe somebody will do that. Okay, the next one is still Mr. Reedville, and he's got one loading and playing tape software from a CDR. Basically just demonstrating that instead of recording, an MP3 on your cell phone or whatever, you can record the audio track that would have gone on a cassette and record it onto a CDR and play it back, and record or load software through the cassette tape, play it off of or through the cassette port, but play it off of a CDR. I think a lot of us probably knew that would work, but just kind of a video demonstrating it.
There is a limitation, not that it would be a burden, but Redbook standard for audio CDs is 99 tracks. So you can have 99 programs accessible on each audio disc, which is still quite a few. In case any listeners are wondering what the maximum would be, 99 would be it. I don't even know if you'd hit that much, though, because, some programs would take 3-4 minutes to load. So, you only have...
Yeah, it depends on the programs, right?
Right, yeah.
You'd probably get tired of 99 tracks anyway. You'd probably just burn another one so you'd only have to skip 10 tracks or whatever.
True.
Okay, and so the next one, he's got another video where he's manipulating programs on a Dragon VDK. Not sure what the software is that he's got over here. I think a lot of people don't realize that the Dragon DOS actually does a different disk format than the CoCo DOSes. At the same time we were originally writing CoCo emulators, they were busy writing Dragon emulators, so they came up with their own image format. So whereas we typically have DSK files, which are some people say aren't formatted at all because they're just a pile of sectors or whatever. But anyway, we have DSK files formatted for CoCo DOSes, like RS-DOS, and they don't really work with the Dragon emulators or whatever because they're expecting a different format, a logical format of the disk. And so they have their own. They're typically called VDKs or virtual disks. Anyway, the point being that you need different tools for writing to disk images for CoCo DOS versus the Dragon DOS. So it's worth pointing out. That's kind of what Mr. Reedville is doing here. Very cool. Many of you are aware of Roger Taylor, a notable CoCo personality, especially from the past, but he's still out there doing his own thing mostly. He's been working on some FPGA-based CoCo emulations, simulations, clones, whatever you want to call them. His latest version is using something called the Mister, which another board that comes out of a different project, the Mist project, I guess. But anyway, he's targeted his CoCo clone at Mister. Now he's got a case, a 3D printed case for the Mister project hardware. Kind of looks, at least makes it look a little bit more like a computer. And he's selling them. You can order them off his website. It looks like $25. Very exciting stuff.
All right. Our next news item is from Ed Snyder again. He's popular this month. And what he's saying is, so yesterday, D. Bruce Moore was asking in the chat on CoCo Talk about converting MIDI to playback on the new Mega Mini MPI. So what Ed's showing here, it's a YouTube video, and it's his first try at playing back a converted MIDI file on the Mega Mini MPI using the OPL3 sound chip.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is kind of similar to the MIDI to MML. This converts MIDI to basically a register dump format for the OPL3 chip, and that he's dumping the registers in the proper times to play music. Anyway, if you play, you can listen to some of the songs, some of the music coming, some of the chip tunes coming out of his OPL3 chip. And like I said, if you listen to the chip tunes, it's pretty nice. It's just a cool way to expand the available catalog of music by being able to pick up MIDI files and dump them.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know if he made the software available anywhere. I don't. Maybe no.
So
Yeah, I don't see it here, man.
It's definitely another avenue for game development if you're
right
looking to make
it
some
could
music.
be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, speaking of games, next one is from Jim Gary, and he's converted another game here. It's called Dam Busters. That game rings a bell for some reason, that name. I'm not sure. Do you guys know this one?
It says a new game for the MC-10 inspired by a similar game for the Commodore VIC-20.
You know what? That's it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I have seen this on the VIC-20.
Very cool.
Our next news item is from James Diffendaffer. It's titled A Little CoCo Basic Gaming Action.
Yeah, he's promoting Steve Strobridge's Cosmic Aliens project. For those following what Steve's been up to, he has a game that he wrote in Quick Basic or something for DOS years ago that he's been porting over to the CoCo. Here's a video that kind of describes it, and so James is posting it over there on Atari Age. Biggest reason I included this is just to include a reference to the Atari Age so that people know they can go out there and talk CoCo if they feel like it. Very cool.
All right, our next news item is looks like an advertisement from Kansas Fest. It's from their website, and Reliving Kansas Fest 2018.
It's got a lot of videos from their talks at Kansas Fest. If you click in the playlist in the upper left corner, you can choose from about 34 videos.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's tons here.
Very cool, including a talk by Kevin Savitz where he actually has a Laserdisc game being controlled by an Apple II. Again, not a CoCo project, but it sure could be. Very cool.
You should take this next one, John. This one's near and dear to your heart.
It is.
Yeah, this is cool.
Right. Let's see, that's a link from Adafruit. It says Play Robot Odyssey, a 1984 computer game. Micah Elizabeth Scott recently translated the awesome game, and you can play it online. It looks like a faithful rendition to me.
Yeah.
But Robot Odyssey is a cool puzzle game where you build logic circuits inside of robots and wire up sensors and grippers and stuff like that in order to pick up items where your person maybe can't travel and solve the puzzle or whatever. It's a cool game. This was actually the game that brought me back to the CoCo after college. I remembered playing it and had a little extra income at that point and thought maybe I should find a CoCo and find that game. Definitely cool. Check it out. See if you can get your way out of Robotropolis.
A little trivia for you guys. The CoCo version of this game was written for the CoCo 1 and 2. It ran under OS 9. And if my memory serves me right, the company that did the port to it was, I think, Computerware. Somehow Computerware was involved in that port of Robot Odyssey, because I remember sometime in the mid-'80s getting a flyer in the mail that talked about it. There was something about the fact that Computerware was involved in that, if my memory is correct.
That's cool.
Fort Knox. More than 5,000 tons of precious metal lie behind a 22-ton vault door. The walls are concrete-lined granite. There are armed guards, fences, tanks, and Apache helicopters to deter any unwanted entry. Stealing gold from Fort Knox is virtually impossible. But how do you protect? Toilet paper? It's Color Outhouse, an outrageous game for the Tandy color computer. Thieves are sneaking into your outhouse to steal toilet paper. You must protect your outhouse from above in your very own flying saucer. Keeping these tissue bandits at bay is only part of the problem. The sky is filled with other deadly unfriendlies. Do you have the skill to keep your roles intact? Color Outhouse. Distributed by Computer Shack. 32K required.
So the next item on the news list here is FuriousFelines 2. Cut the cheese.
So save the cheese.
Save the cheese. I'm sorry, I just had to say that. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. I was checking this out. Diego Barrizo has made looks like a game. I think this is written in BASIC from what I recall. The website is quite cool. He has the text up in the old CoCo 3 font format and explains how the game works in that. And the graphics actually look pretty darn good.
Yeah, definitely good. You can download it, play for yourself. And so is this one inspired by Angry Birds like the first one, or is it something else?
More or less, it's just added the complexity that now you're trying to get the cats to jump on the mice before they get to the cheese, and they're eating through the walls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Great game.
It's pretty cool. Very nice. And like I said, a lot of effort put in that. The graphics look great. A lot of impressive what you can do with BASIC, even non-compiled BASIC.
Yeah.
It's amazing, the graphics. Looks machine language for sure.
Good job, Diego. Okay, the next topic here is TRS-80 color computer cartridge signals, SCS, CTS, or as Marlette would sometimes say, Cell B, but it's Cell B. It's an inside joke. Looks like 6809 coder put into the video. He was learning these signals. Actually, I watched a little bit of this. This is really cool because, you know, if you're new to hardware or new to the CoCo hardware, some of these signal names are a mystery, and he breaks this down pretty well. I was very impressed with what Michael did here.
Pretty cool video. We almost had Michael on for an interview, and some illness got in the way. Need to get that rescheduled and have him back on to our talk. But yeah, he's got some cool videos out there.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Good job, Michael. The next item in the news list is, if you played Moon Patrol back in the day, check out Amphibia for the color computer. I played Moon Patrol. That was a fun game. In fact, I have it on my main cabinet here. I can call it up and play it. I looked at the video. This is actually a link to a YouTube video. And it looks like this is written in BASIC. He actually types run in the video to start it. Doesn't load it or anything. He just types run. And looks pretty cool. It's another example of a BASIC game, if it is indeed a BASIC game, that is actually pretty impressive.
This was from Rainbow on Tape, right?
Oh,
this was actually from Rainbow. So
very nice, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says right here, straight out of the Rainbow on Tape comes Amphibia. Very nice, pretty cool.
All right, now it's time for the continuation of the Jim Gary Show. So we've got several games here from Jim, which is no surprise. The first two are adventure games. One Room Adventure, you might be familiar with that one. So it's an text adventure game, and it all takes place in one room. So it makes it kind of a unique and interesting game. You'll want to check that one out. The next one is another text adventure called Lighthouse Adventure that he's ported to the MC10. If you're into adventure games, then those two you should definitely check out. And then we have another one that's called, I think this one is pretty interesting. It's called Race Chase on the MC10. This is kind of interesting because you have to basically maneuver through a maze, wiping out dots, and at the same time you're kind of forced to go in one direction, and there's another element, your enemy, going in the opposite direction, and you have to avoid him and navigate the maze properly in the circle. So pretty cool game.
Yeah, very cool. I wonder how it's going to look when it's compiled.
Yeah, well, speed issues. Too fast.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Very cool. So, all right, the next one here. This one made some news. It says 18-year-old retro gaming ROM site known as Emmy Paradise effectively closes its doors. So Emmy Paradise is one of those places you go when you say, "Oh, I don't have ROMs to run with MAME," or "I don't," or whatever. You go and get them. Although the BitTorrent probably still works better, but for those that aren't torrent aware, or if you only need one set of ROMs or whatever, there's Emmy Paradise. I don't know. There were a lot of other alternatives too, or a fair number, and I'm not sure if any of those have closed down as well. But Emmy Paradise got some sort of takedown from the Mario company, and I don't know if they only took down their Nintendo ROMs or if they because they've shut their doors, so I don't know. Maybe they'll be back. Who knows? But find it hard to imagine that it's going to be impossible to find ROMs on the internet. But
That's out of the bag.
Yeah, but I guess at some point you need to take a certain amount of action. Although I've talked to a lot of lawyers. And the open source community is full of lawyers that know something about intellectual property. In fact, most of them hate the term intellectual property, and this is a whole different discussion. But my understanding is you don't really have to defend copyright in order to keep it. You have to defend trademarks, but not copyright. And so I'm not sure if this is about copyright. Now, the downside is if you don't defend your copyright, you might diminish the value that you can collect on those who you do enforce on.
Right.
So it's a little tricky, nuance. It's hard to understand. That's why people go to law school. But anyway, they had a discussion of this on the other CoCo talk show. A lot of people deserve to be paid for their stuff. Well, yeah, but these people were paid for their stuff 30 years ago, and I'm not going to pay for it anyway. I don't know. I don't really want to get into a discussion like that. I thought about having it as a host discussion about the effects of this, but they covered it well enough. My only thought that I got along those lines is, one of the frustrating things years ago in the CoCo hobby, say the late 90s, even in the early 2000s, is there still were a lot of old-timers around who still thought they could sell their game that they, utility software that they'd written in 1983, they still thought they could sell it for $50, and, I imagine at the very least they didn't sell any. And I always felt like that for a long time they kind of held the CoCo down, and then, as I've said before, by the time we started this podcast and some of the other activities that led to this podcast, felt like the community was almost on its last legs. But coinciding with some of that timing, I'm not exactly sure when the Color Computer Archive opened, but it's in roughly that same time period. And so once the Color Computer Archive became available, now a lot of that stuff had been available. There was a lot of stuff available on rtsi.com or whatever, and some other sites, but it's sort of the dam broke or whatever, and people started uploading more of the stuff that had been copyrighted material, or what still was, I guess, but had been more viciously protected. And it started to become more available, and then that coincides with the CoCo itself being more popular and having more energy in the community. And so it's not really a surprise, I guess, that there's more preservation available. But I think it's interesting to note. And so I would hate to see this kind of enforcement go beyond go beyond this at all, really, but to go to the point where it knocks out every site where you can get some stuff, because it could damage our community and other retro communities.
I think the CoCo is somewhat immune to that because we're, although it's a bigger community than it used to be, it doesn't suffer from having a progenitor out there that still claims ownership of ROMs or things like that. So.
That's certainly true.
Yeah, smaller community.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be, if that happened to us, that'd be pretty devastating.
Yep.
Just give them the middle finger.
All right.
Move
So I'll
to the
move
dark
on.
web.
Let's go to the dark web.
Yeah.
Um,
Move on.
so I'll move on. This one's from Ed Snyder. He posted. He says, "This is what I want to do for a long time, so might as well design one too." Kind of a reference to this seems to become the popular, the kind of hardware that everybody decided they have to do it at the same time. So we've got six versions of this project all of a sudden, different people. Anyway, he appears to be designing a keyboard. I think he goes into some other details where he's going to have cherry switches and mechanical stuff, and he's talking about custom keycaps. And I think he even, I don't know if he bought his laser engraver just for this purpose. Hopefully not. But I know he did get a laser engraver, and he's practicing engraving keycaps. Anyway, so there may be another mechanical keyboard available for the CoCos, another mechanical keyboard option. This would be an entire keyboard, as opposed to, say, the Cloud9 option is basically a replacement for the Mylars, which you still have to use your existing keycaps and such. Which way is better? Well, that's a matter of personal judgment, I think. I don't see a reference to price here. We'll see where it comes out. I don't know, you guys, how to get a new keyboard?
Well, it's not a bad project. I mean, if you're not wanting to use a CoCo keyboard, I mean, these were things that were made back in the day, and I do think this is driven. I mean, Ed even says so, that he's something he's wanted to do for a long time. So I think he's enjoying doing it, whether there's a bunch of people clamoring for it or not, just to prove it can be done or whatever. It might be kind of nice, like the the old HJL and all that. But you can just as easily hook up a PS2 keyboard easily as well.
Right. There's different variations. Some people are satisfied with the PS2 or USB, whatever. I guess not USB, but others want a mechanical keyboard, or we want stuff to plug into our actual CoCos. That's fine. However you want to do it. It's just observing how it seems like that we seem to be taking turns where everybody does their version of the same project. So at least we moved on to a different one. Now everybody's doing the keyboard projects instead of everybody doing the audio card projects. But anyway, all right. So let's move on. I'll take the next two because they're kind of together. They both come from Ron Klein, but sort of. I mean, they were actually kind of referenced off to Christopher Hawk's projects, his Cocoa Pie project. And so we've got a link to a PDF where Christopher Hawks wrote an article describing his Cocoa Pie project. And then you got a gzip tarball, which is kind of like a zip file for those that don't know, of code for a teensy microcontroller that provides an interface between a physical CoCo keyboard and USB so that you can plug your CoCo keyboard into, say, a Raspberry Pi or a PC or whatever. So maybe put this together to get your teensy with the Cocoa Pie project and hook it up with Ed's project, and so you can have a brand new retro keyboard to plug into your PC.
It's double retro.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you can run your emulator on the PC, right? Whatever. So very good. Lots of cool stuff going on.
Next news article is from Paul Thayer, and he has discovered a way to double buffer in BASIC on the CoCo 3.
Yeah, so I'm not sure he published a lot of details in there, or if he did, I missed them. But basically, I think he's figured out the combination of register settings he can poke at certain times in BASIC to get the effect of the screen flip that otherwise you'd been able to do, like on the CoCo 2, you could do a screen 1-1 versus screen 1-2, or screen 1-0 versus screen 1-1, whichever it is. Whichever the numbers are. Anyway, there's basic commands that'll let you flip screens, or double buffer. but in the H screen commands don't let you do it. And I don't know if that's just because the memory, the BASIC's written for 128K CoCos and there's just not enough space or something like that. But I guess he's figured out if you set certain limitations and then you can basically poke some stuff and get the same effect. So that's cool. You can double buffer his video and that way you can have nice graphics and animation without the tearing.
Cool.
Yeah, that's
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, he's pretty active right now working on that new game. That's good to see.
Always good to see.
Next one is Open VCC project update from Walter Zambotti.
Yeah, I don't know how you pronounce it. That sounds right to me.
And he's just he did an update of some changes he's made.
Yeah, I think he even had another update past this where this one says he has some problem with sound, and then the next update said the sound was working too. So that's pretty cool. He's taking the VCC project, which was pretty heavily tied to some Windows APIs, and taking on the task of moving over to SDL. I think that's right. And sounds like he's getting pretty close. So SDL is a platform independent library for doing, GUI kind of applications. And it sounds like he's making good progress. So it's good to see that. I've still got my own personal issues with VCC. One of those was always that it was Windows only. It was originally closed source, and then it was Windows only, and sounds like you're going to take care of some of that. So maybe VCC will grow up and it'll be good.
You might become a VCC fan after all.
Well, that's not likely, but it's possible. All right. The link here, videos of by the CoCo Crew hosts, and I listed the CoCo Crew. Really, I sent the tweet. Basically, I've created a YouTube playlist, I guess is what you call it, where I've collected videos that are either relevant ones that are posted or some that I think there's some from Mike on here, and then there's some from Steve Strobridge, and there might be some other CoCo related stuff in there, but stuff that's like the interview that I did with Steve Strobridge is on here. Anyway, just to get some video content out and keep just to make the show more relevant, I guess, to get some content out there. All right. Well, in the name of bizarre entertainment related to retro computers, we got a video. I think Jim Gary may have originally posted this link, but it's from someone called Moletastic, published on YouTube, and it is, well, it's strange, but it's yeah, but it's video of somebody programming on an MC10, and it's artistically filmed, I guess, is one way to say it. It's weird. A hippie shaving. There he goes. Shot at 6119 Racine Street, Oakland, California, 1997. Very important. I don't know. It's a strange one, but just take a look if you got nothing better to do.
And the music's the MC10 too. So.
Yeah.
It's
very cool. Very cool. All right, well, that is the end of our new segment. So we're going to take another break here. Back with some feedback.
The color computer is a powerful home computer, but if you've tried writing programs, you'll quickly learn that editing is tedious and requires either perfection or a lot of retyping. Stop suffering. Get the WorkSaver from Platinum Software. The WorkSaver features full-screen editing. Simply use arrow keys to move to anywhere on the screen and instantly make changes to your code. Change line numbers, join lines together, duplicate lines and place them anywhere in your code. Bring up arrays on screen and edit them directly. Use two-stroke sequences for full keywords. Enjoy automatic line numbering and a numeric keypad. These powerful features and many more are made even easier with the included keyboard template.
I was excited about the idea behind it. I was curious whether or not it was going to be able to execute like it said it was going to. Absolutely flawless. I'm super happy with the quality. I'm super happy with the overall engineering of this. And obviously, I'm even more happy with what it gets done, how well it does it, and the short amount of time it takes.
The Work Saver is just $30 plus shipping and handling and includes a 28-page manual plus the keyboard template. Save yourself hours of typing and make your programming experience what it should have been in the first place with the Work Saver, only from Platinum Software, Plattsburgh, New York.
All right, now we're back with some feedback. There's a couple of items this month. First one comes from Nick Marentes in the response to our reporters or commentators discussion last month. So he goes on, he says, sometimes carefully crafted criticism targeted at the right people can have a positive effect on projects and the community as a whole. I'm basically agreeing the notion that it's okay to express some critical comments, I guess. I think he's used that then to go on to take some credit for inspiring the ease of use OS 9 or Nitrous 9 project. And so because Nick's been a little notorious as a critic of OS 9 over the years. So, and I think he's probably right. It's sometimes good to say, hey, maybe that's not so great. Maybe you could do better. So this one's from L. Curtis Boyle. And he says, I think Boise nailed it with his points in the discussion. I wholeheartedly agree with his approach. So, Boise, how do you react to that one?
Well, thank you, Curtis. I like when you agree with me. It makes me feel good.
All right, very good. All right, well, that's all it for our feedback. So, take another little break, and we'll be back with a host discussion.
There are many great word processors for the color computer, but there's only one that gives you the simplicity of a point-and-click interface. It's Max 10 from Colorware. Max 10 is a true WYSIWYG word processor. WYSIWYG means what you see is what you get. What you see on your screen is what you will see on your printer. Combine multiple fonts, incorporate pictures into your documents. Format in columns, making newsletters a joy to work with. Max 10 is so easy it's almost completely intuitive. Max 10 from Colorware, the word processing program you've been waiting for.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, I think we've got a good discussion warmed up for you now. What happens sometimes in the retro communities, there's some amount of history and interest in history that brings us all into our retro communities, particularly around the CoCo. And so we reach out to people who were there, people who worked for the companies that produced the machines we love, or who wrote certain software games, or even people who were just sort of in the industry at the time. The problem with, of course, is we're talking about something 30 years ago, and if people were in the primes of their careers doing cool stuff, then they were probably already maybe in their late 20s or 30s or maybe 40s 30 years ago, which means today they're in their 60s or 70s. And as all of us who have aging parents know, sometimes the years are not entirely kind to people's memory. Some people handle that gracefully, some people less so. So once in a while you get someone who's been treated as it being in the position to know something, sometimes doesn't know it, or they remember it wrongly. And sometimes they remember it wrongly in a way that if you're knowledgeable, you can see that it's wrong, but, it's not necessarily clearly just factually wrong. I don't know. You sometimes have to exercise some discretion. Other times you might call them out on it, and some people handle that well, and some people down and insist that they're right when they're clearly wrong. Anyway, so we've seen some of that maybe recently in our community, on the Facebook groups. Some of it got a little vicious, but the person in question maybe fought back a little harder than they should have. I don't know. Anyway, I'm kind of dancing around, beating around the bush a little bit. I know everybody in the group kind of knows what I'm talking about. I'll let them reveal it as they see fit. So I'm just going to throw it open to the crowd here. When you have somebody whose memory may be getting a little fuzzy, and they may not be remembering everything accurately, I guess that's just one thing, but sometimes they go on to pushing what amounts to disinformation into the crowd, and not everybody's able to separate the disinformation from just a bad memory. So, what do you think about when this happens? How do you handle it? What's the appropriate way to deal with that? And what do you think about how these things have been handled more recently in the community?
I'll jump in on this one.
All right.
So you're referring to the Mark Siegel comment about the CoCo 3 having a 2-layer mode for graphics?
Yeah, exactly.
Posted that, yeah. So I'm not on Facebook as much as I used to be. I kind of rescinded my old account, so I'm not really involved much. But somebody had pointed me to this particular topic. I think it was started a week ago or so. And Mark posted a link to a YouTube video with the Sockmaster bouncing ball demo, and I think he indicated incorrectly that it was, first of all, a 2-layer graphics demo, and I think his faux pas there is he didn't really specify what he meant by 2-layer graphics, maybe using some ambiguous terminology. The other thing he did mistakenly is he contributed the demo to Spectral Associates. And, of course, it was Sockmaster's demo on the CoCo 3. So anyway, I think people were asking him for clarification, basically saying, hey, this is not Spectral Associates demo, it's Sockmaster's demo, and then asking about his use of terminology for 2-layer. And I think Mark, as I recall, and I'm actually getting to the post right now as I'm talking, kind of doubled down a little bit. He did admit that maybe it was not the original Spectral Associates demo, but he kept talking about this 2-layer mode, and I think it caused a bit of confusion and some consternation, and it got kind of ugly, frankly. I was disappointed by how people were just, beating the guy while he was down a bit. I guess maybe I have a soft spot for Mark because Mark was a source, not the only source, but one of the sources at Tandy for the CoCo book that I wrote, that Bill and I wrote back in 2013. And you got to give people a little bit of grace and understanding. Maybe they don't remember things like they used to. I don't think there was any malice intended for Mark's faux pas, although he probably, like all of us, could have, ate a little more humble pie than he did. But I think the overreaction and the piling on was just disgusting, frankly. I was really turned off by it.
Yeah. So there was an assertion in the thread, maybe by more than one person, certainly by some certain people, that maybe Mark was fully aware that what he was saying was wrong, that he was just toying with us or, jerking people's chains or whatever. What do you think about that? Do you have any reaction to that? I don't know him well enough personally to know if that seems like a personality thing that he would do or not.
I don't know Mark, outside of having met him a couple of times. And like I said, we all make mistakes and our memories maybe fade over time. And Mark is, it's like all of us, he's getting older. So I can't speak. Like I said, I don't think it was malicious or intentional. Who knows, man? You got all these personalities on the Facebook group, and it seems like some people just walk around, ready to challenge anything, and just the language, just a little harsh on the guy. I don't know. It frankly turns me off about the community, and I think people need to go back and look at how they type things and how it comes across, and try to be a little bit more kind and compassionate. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I was seeing those comments. I mean, that's a part of social media I really hate because half of those people, probably more than half of them, would never, have the guts to say that to somebody up, up.
Of course not. Of course not. Keyboard warriors and that sort of thing. It's, you're absolutely right, Neil. That's why I just pretty much have stopped posting on Facebook or commenting completely.
Yeah, I think you're right. Social media tends to, passions can flow faster, and it's easier to type things that you would never ever, you would never behave that way, hopefully, face to face with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, I recently posted a comment to the effect of that social media is the great shame of our profession.
Yeah.
We gave something we gave the world that might be better if we could take it back.
Yeah.
Regarding the discussion in particular, I don't mean to prolong. Well, maybe if just for airtime, it's good to have, but I don't mean to prolong the negativity. But it seemed like there was definitely some pent up aggression. It's like people were. It wasn't just the kind of thing that you just jump on somebody for saying something dumb or inaccurate, even if you think they were purposely saying something wrong. It was beyond that. It was a viciousness and a quickness or whatever. What do you think that was the cause of all that pent up aggression?
So I think that there's some history between some of the actors in that conversation, and you take Mark's been in the industry a while. He was sort of the shepherd of the Color Computer 3 and I guess the CoCo in general, and there's probably some water under the bridge that is getting picked back up in a bucket that we probably don't know much about. So I saw some of that. I saw some more recent comments from people who felt that Mark was maybe misleading the community, maybe not intentionally, but just through omission by not being accurate about some of the features that he claimed were in the CoCo 3. I tried to address that, Bill and I both in the book, specifically with the 256 color mode, which I don't think, frankly, exists as it was described by Mark. But again, we all have our misrememberings. So that's my take on it. Neil, what do you think? Did you find anything particularly aligning with what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, I agree, and I think that's exactly it with the 256 color mode. And I mean that I think that's what triggered some of the the pent up anger.
Yeah.
The countless hours that people put into it.
Yeah, I do think what we saw though, it's one thing people have past and people have history. Sometimes when somebody's got some history with, kind of makes a misstep, you may react a little strongly than maybe you should or when you would normally choose to do. But you can see where it happens because you've got that history. I think the problem is in a public forum like that, especially where anybody can just sort of chime in.
Right.
When they see it start to get a little nasty, people start showing their teeth or whatever. The people who want to jump in and dance around and show their own teeth. and it's like, not really sure where that came from. I mean, not everybody had history to justify the negativity. And speaking of, there were certain players or whatever, people that probably do have history that might justify some amount of pent-up aggression. They should probably also keep in mind their own foibles, and that they don't all remember everything correctly. There's some discussion a few months back about a 5 amp power supply, and about what machine was siphoning away chips from what other machine that got canceled, that sort of thing that proved to not be true. And it may be the way that was remembered, maybe what they were told in the past. They may just have been told the wrong thing 30 years ago. I mean, you don't know. And so I'm not attributing any kind of malice to mistakes or whatever. I mean, like I say, it's just some version of the don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to, human weakness or however you want to phrase that thought. So I don't know. Like I said, it was a little disturbing to see the blood sport, shall we say, on this particular thread for somebody who, in my opinion, has never had that high a profile in the larger community. He certainly had a high profile, in the insiders game. Certainly with somebody that was at Rainbow Fest and at Tandy Corporate, whatever. But when I was a kid playing on my CoCo, I didn't know anybody at Tandy Corporate. I barely knew the names of the CEO or whatever of Temp Radio Shack because they show up in an editorial or something once in a while. That's about it. So anyway, for somebody who I don't think had that much name recognition in the community at large, it doesn't seem like people be on their toes ready to tear them up. So it was a little shocking to see that. And so I don't know, maybe just everybody was having a bad day, or maybe just something caught people as particularly funny or whatever. Anyway, not our proudest moment as a community, I think. I think maybe we can all agree on that, at least within this discussion.
We can do better. We can be kinder and gentler. And I'm even preaching to myself about that, because Lord knows in the past I have not always been following that. I've had my issues with some people in the community, but at this point in my life, I've learned to just tone down and tune out. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I've been known as a bit of a rumbler or scrapper or whatever from time to time in that same sort of regard.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's one of those, sometimes there'll be a song on the radio that I'll be the only person in the room that says, that seems a little sexist. And I'm not that kind of guy. You know what I mean? I'm not the kind of guy that finds... and so when I'm the only feminist in the room, there's something a little strange going on. And so when I'm the only soft talker in the room, it seems a little strange too. But maybe this is one of those cases where somebody's got to do it.
One more thing I'll add to that is, when you are wrong, when you are called out and you're wrong, just admit it and move on. It's easier than trying to double down and be hard-headed about it. It just makes people more antagonizing.
Yeah, and it can be hard, but usually you can at least find a way to soft pedal it. Say, well, maybe I'm not remembering it correctly, or something like that, and then everybody saves face.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the bottom line is, though, it doesn't matter who it is, in the community. If they make a post, and for a fact it's wrong, I mean, you don't have to go about it in that angry way, right? You can just write it in a nicer way and just kind of challenge it. It's all in the wording. I mean, you don't have to.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I agree, Neil. Good points.
And this is also the perfect time for me to mention that there's some stochastic circuits that actually enable a 257 color mode. That's what everybody's missing.
Lord.
I'm going to have to find that paper on IEEE Explorer.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, does that beat this one to death? Is that all we need to say on this? Or
yeah, the horse is on its side. It's.
I mean, I might could call my mom and see if she's got any insight on how we should be talking to each other. She used to be helpful in these sort of things.
Oh, yes, mothers know that.
All right, well, we'll let this one drop. Then we'll take another break, and we'll be back with some other part of the show.
Come to the Radio Shack hideout. I'm Mr. Small, and I'm tired of big computers. Give me something that's really, really small.
MC10 is small. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not big. No, no, no. MC10's got just 4 gigabytes. Tiny metal keys in a case that's white.
Radio Shack's MC10 combined with any color television gives you a big system in a tiny package.
4 gigabytes, they feel right. Tiny metal keys in a case that's white.
Oh, howdy, partner. Time for timer. Do you ever have that coding feeling after school? Boy, I do. I'm just itching to write a good program. When I'm trying to write a program I like, I hanker for a CoCo 3. Here's a neat little trick that looks really slick with parts from Radio Shack. Here's a neat hardware hack. Come on. Here's an easy way to add a power on indicator. Just attach an LED in series with a 470 ohm resistor between 5 volts and ground. Look, power's on. When I have data to place into mentioned arrays, I hanker for a CoCo 3. When on the screen needs to be set to a new, brighter color set for any time I want to program and see. I hanker for a CoCo. An Apple II's a no-no. The CoCo is a winner before or after dinner. I hanker for a CoCo 3. Yahoo!
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome to your tech segment for episode 39 of the CoCo Crew podcast. This, of course, is John, and here today, it's going to be a little bit more of an ad hoc affair than normal. I don't have a lot of preparation here, just sort of had a vague idea for a topic and maybe two. I'm just going to hodgepodge things together and hope things work out all right. So, it's kind of a 2-for-1, but neither topic will go too in-depth, I hope. Anyway, so topic 1. Something I want to make people aware of that I'm not sure a lot of people are aware of. Well, so anyway, a lot of us have at one time or another used our cell phone to play a WAV file representing a cassette tape, the audio from a CoCo cassette tape, and play that into a live CoCo or MC10 or possibly some other unrelated system that also uses the same kind of tape storage. That works pretty well for the most part, but basically all you have to do is take the cassette, the output of take the cable that would go to the microphone or the audio output from the cassette tape, and instead plug that into your cell phone, and usually that works pretty well. But there are some limitations, well, maybe not limitations so much as disappointments or whatever. Obviously that you can't just, the only reason that works, I guess, is because there's a certain amount of mechanical compatibility between, the older mono 1/8" plugs, like what you're plugging into the cassette player, and of course, the later stereo 1/8" plugs, like you would use for, say, a headset for your Walkman. And then, if you've ever noticed, the headsets, or the phone headsets, the ones that include a microphone input, they're the same, look like the same plug on at first, but then they're a little bit different too. So the old mono plugs basically had, a little metal tip, and then a plastic, usually black plastic insulator, and then most of the body of the plug was a second connector, a second conductor. And then, of course, if you've seen, the old headset connectors, usually it looks pretty similar, but instead of one black ring, there were two black rings. Now, this is sometimes called a TRS, which is tip ring sleeve connector. Nothing to do with Tandy Radio Shack, at least not as far as I know. I'm not sure what they call the mono one. That'd just be like TS connector, tip sleeve. But the stereo plugs, tip ring sleeve, and those are pretty compatible because basically the ring and the sleeve both go to headphone stuff, and so when you plug in the mono there, you kind of feed the signal back to or either stereo output hits the same sleeve connector. I don't know. I'll just say it generally works. Okay. Now, when you go to the headset adapter for the modern cell phones, you now have 3 of the little black insulators, and so you end up with what's called the tip ring sleeve, or TRRS. The sleeve itself isn't much longer than the other rings anyway. So a TRRS connector. So now you have, of course, ground, left and right headphones, and then the other connector is for the microphone. So fine, that's great, right? And that seems to work well enough when you plug in the mono input for audio that goes to your cassette input on your CoCo. I actually think there's a circuitry in this cell phone or whatever that figures out that you're doing that and make sure the signals are still compatible. Like I said, it works. But what doesn't work is if you pull out the output or the input connector from the cassette port and then plug in the output connector and then try to save your program out onto, say, an audio recorder on your cell phone. At least I don't think that'll work. It has never worked for me. I'm pretty sure. I'm not entirely sure. I even tried it since I figured it wouldn't work. I did at one time try to build a cable based off some pinout information on the web. I had mixed success. I thought I had it working, and then it wasn't working. So I don't know if something got bent or whatever. Anyway, the point being, it sure would be nice if, nobody really likes the cassette interface all that much, but most of that was because of the cassettes. And if you are toying around with your CoCo programming somewhere, it's nice to not have to carry much else except for the cell phone that you're going to carry anyway. And if you do write a program, it'd be nice to be able to save it. So what do you do? Okay, so it turns out that you can get the cable that has the TRRS connector for going to your cell phone, and then it splits off to two mono plugs. One is actually stereo, I guess, but one for the microphone input, and then one for the stereo headset output. They're not too hard to find if you look for them. I'm going to include a link in the show notes to one. I think it's on Amazon. That's the StarTech headset adapter for headsets with separate headphone/microphone plugs. 3.5 millimeter 4 position to, it says 2x3 position, 3.5 millimeter male female. So I'm not sure why it says male female. Anyway, well, male. So it's the male 4 connector to the female 3 connectors. You can see if you go and look at Amazon, the cable pretty clearly what plugs into the cell phone, and then the other ends actually even have little pictures of a microphone on one and a stereo on the other. So then you could take and plug those into the jacks that would go to the cassette port from your cassette cable. Then you can use your audio recorder app and of course your audio playback apps on your cell phone. You can save and play back stuff that you've written on your CoCo or your MC10. I don't know. Is that cool? I think that's kind of cool. Is it, obviously, diskettes is usually going to be better, or diskettes got a lot of bulk that goes with it, and diskettes themselves are, some people claim they're old and unreliable already. I think it depends on your particular diskette drive more than anything, but there's the CoCo SDC or whatever. That's great. The SDC is not too much to carry around, but it is a little bit extra. Like I said, sometimes it's nice just to be able to play back off your cell phone. And depending on the situation, you may want to make a change out in the field and save it off somewhere. So, anyway, this is a way to do it. So, price, looks like on Amazon, the current price, I says, is list price $10.99, current price $6.70. And it is available for Prime, so you can, if you're an Amazon Prime customer, you could have this within 2 days of hearing me. So, hooray. I'm trying to think, is there anything else to cover on this? Oh, even if you want to use the cassette ports with your laptop, I noticed that I have the Lenovo X1 Carbon here, and this one's got 3 or 4 years on it, but the single headphone style jack that it has actually is a cell phone headset style jack with TRRS connectors, and so you can do the same thing here. It's, if you want to be able to record on your laptop, you're still going to have to use this kind of cable to plug it out, to break it out to the separate microphone and headphones. then once you've done so, you can use regular audio recording or playback applications to impersonate the cassette player and use it with real CoCo hardware or MC10. It's useful. I think it's kind of cool. May not be what you do all the time, but it's kind of a nice trick to have in your back pocket. And for a cable that can cost you, $5 or $6 or even less on eBay, it's probably worth having that trick in your back pocket. Okay, so that was my first hodgepodge topic. Going to go a little bit farther here into the world of emulators and using MAME in particular. MAME is the multiple arcade machine emulator. It's pretty popular in the overall world perspective for playing emulated arcade games and for emulating a wide variety of retro computers. It used to be the job of MES versus MAME. MES was originally forked from MAME and has been reabsorbed into MAME. So when I say MAME, if you're thinking of something called MES and MAME are the same thing. Okay. One of the things that some emulators have is a feature called AutoType or QuickType, which basically lets you tell the emulator, hey, here's a text file. Why don't you pretend that I just typed this into the keyboard? And so it saves you from having to type in something that you've already got recorded as an ASCII text file. And for whatever reason, MAME does not seem to have this implemented, or at least not in any version that's commonly available. Why? I really don't know. It seems like a reasonable feature to have, and it doesn't seem like the kind of thing that would break anybody's philosophy. Sometimes they're pretty strict about what they emulate and how or whatever. They've gotten to where they're emulating the noises of floppy disk drives for some ridiculous reason. But I don't know, like I said, sometimes they're a little funny about refusing to emulate things or to add features because they don't exist in real hardware or whatever. Maybe, obviously the real hardware doesn't have an AutoType feature, but I would think that's, well, like I said, I don't know if there's an actual philosophical opposition to this or not, but whatever reason, it doesn't seem to have it. What it does have is a kind of similar facility where you can specify a command that when you bring up your emulation, you can give it an auto boot command, which means that when you start it up, I want you to type in this command, and you can even give it, say, I want you to wait so many seconds for initialization or whatever, and then execute this command or whatever. And so it's not exactly QuickType or AutoType because you can't just kick it off at any time. You can only kick it off at startup. But I would think for most people that are looking to type in a basic program automatically, being able to do that at startup is probably pretty much what they want, because they probably want to make the change to their basic program and then run the emulator to test it and have the emulator type it in for them so they don't have to do it. And if that's not exactly what you're doing, well, then this may not be helpful. But anyway, so you've got this auto boot command, and it's designed for you have a fairly short command that you type in at the command line when you're starting MAME. So something like clodem or run or exec or something like that. Maybe type DOS so you boot into OS 9 or something like that. But it's after some experimentation, it looks like that there's not, well, if there's a limit to the command line, it's pretty long. I figured out that at least on Linux or any other Unix style system, you should be able to use this technique to kind of trick the auto boot command into typing your entire program for you, at least until your program gets big enough that it stops working. When you're on a Unix style command line, you can there's ways to tell the command line to execute another command and use the output from that command as part of your command line. And this in the past was done with backticks, with some of the older shells. With Bash, you can still use the backticks, or you can use a dollar, and the dollar sign will follow by a parentheses, open parentheses, your command, and then close parentheses, and then whatever's in those parentheses, whatever output it produces will be treated as part of your command line. So I wrote a little script to put in that command line with, an argument that it represents, say, your basic program. And what it does is it'll take your basic program and use a command called cat, which basically is like type from the DOS days or whatever, just to list the contents of that file. And it does some conversions on it. And basically what it does is it converts the end of line, the actual end of lines characters in the text file into the \n notation that's needed for the auto boot command to see the new lines, which is basically similar to what C programmers are used to seeing for adding new lines to their text output. And that's pretty much it. There's a little sed script, and if you're not familiar with sed, well, this really won't help you because it's a little bit of magic or whatever, a little complicated, and I'm not going to try to explain it. Anyways, I guess I should put a link of some sort to the posting I did on the Facebook group. Anyway, if you use a script like this, you can then run MAME, and it'll type in your basic program. And so if you want to maintain your basic program on your Linux system using, whatever editors and tools that you're used to using there, you can then run MAME and have it type it in for you. Was that useful? I mean, it probably depends on your exact, your exact process or whatever, but certainly for, some initial just putzing around with a little basic program, I think that'd be really helpful. And it's been helpful for me in some things already, and so hopefully it'll be helpful to you. So I did post this stuff on Facebook. You can go look for it there. I'll try to find it, a link again, and put it in the show notes. Anyway, hopefully you'll find that useful. So there you go. You're kind of a 2-for-1 hodgepodge ad hoc tech segment this month. You got a description of how to hook up a cable to your cell phone to not only play back WAV files but also record them. For saving programs you've written on your CoCo in place of a cassette port or a cassette tape. And then also if you're using MAME to write basic programs, a little tip on how you can get the basic program to get typed in for you by MAME so that you don't have to do it yourself, and so you don't have to figure out how to get it converted over into a disk image and mount it properly or whatever, which isn't that hard either. But it's more of somebody asked if it could be done, and then saw this and saw, that'd be cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show. As always, CoCo forever, and we'll see you at CoCo Fest.
Fred.
Yeah?
Remember when I wanted to run the business on our color computer?
Yeah.
And you said it was too hard to move back and forth through all those different programs.
Yeah.
And you said all the software would cost $1,000.
Yeah.
Well, you want to hear something?
No.
VIP Library integrates all the applications we need, and guess who sells it?
Tiny Tim.
No, SD Enterprises.
Swell.
All 6 VIP applications are combined onto one disk. VIP Database, VIP Writer, VIP Spell, VIP Calc, Terminal, and Disk Zap. So we can do mail merge, finances, correspondence, all with VIP Library.
Yeah?
Yeah, and it's not $1,000. It's just $169.95.
Wonderful.
Finally, we'll have time to go see a movie.
No.
VIP Library, the only integrated application suite your CoCo will ever need.
Radio Shack has big news. It's the new Tandy Color Computer 3. It has 128K of memory built in. Choose from a palette of 64 brilliant colors. The keyboard features new function keys. And with the new CM8 RGB monitor, take full advantage of the Color Computer 3's 80-column text mode. And best of all, your local Radio Shack dealer has them right now, along with a complete line of other Radio Shack and Tandy computers. When you see them, you'll know why Radio Shack is the biggest name in little computers.
All right, welcome, CoCo Cruisers. We've got a bit of a treat. We're going to have what could be considered a listener interview or a community member interview. It turns out it's more of a get to know you because we've got somebody new that we're going to bring on as one of our regular hosts on the show. So without any further introduction, we're going to introduce Mr. Ron Klein. How you doing, Ron?
Hey, John. Doing very well, thank you. Hello, everybody.
Joining us, so we have Myro is with us. Hello, Mike. How are you?
Hello.
Unfortunately, Boise is otherwise occupied, and Neil has some illness pulling him down. So it's just going to be the three of us this evening, but I think that'll be all right. So, Ron, how did you get involved with the CoCo? If there was a gap and you got reacquainted later, how did that come about?
Well, I first saw the CoCo back in, I guess it would have been junior high school. A friend of mine, his dad worked for Motorola, and I'm not sure if there was an employee deal at the time, but I wound up seeing a CoCo 1 4K at my friend's house. So I would go over there all the time. I was really interested in the machine. I just remember this guy, Jim, the guy that I knew back then in school. He was doing a lot with it already back then. I never heard of things like assembly language and things like that. And this kid was just such a wizard with it. But I was so infatuated with that machine, I really wanted to get one. So as any kid would do that wanted something like that, I would bug my parents. They didn't have a whole lot of money, so I had to wait a little bit. But eventually got a CoCo 2, a 16K version. And from there, doing your odd jobs as a kid, mowing lawns, things like that, I would save for peripherals, but we all know those things were pretty expensive. So, the folks would help where they could. And eventually I wound up building it up to, dual disk drives. And I started with a 300 baud acoustic modem and, other things like that. So that's what got me interested in the CoCo. From there, as I got a little bit older, 18, I wound up getting a job at a local Radio Shack computer center. It was right next to one of the retail stores. It was in a town close to ours. And I worked there for, I don't know, maybe about 14 months doing inside sales and support, receiving customer computers that had to go in for repair. Around that time, the CoCo 3 was out. The Tandy 1000 was really big. So we were doing a lot of sales of that. I was doing memory upgrades, things for the Tandy 1000. As a lot of people have speculated during that time, there was no promotion of the CoCo 3 at all. And in fact, this place sold a lot of business machines. So that was my first experience with Xenix. I wasn't doing the installs, but I was around specialists that were in the store when they were setting up or even doing training. We had a training center within that facility. So I kind of stayed involved with the CoCo right up until probably the later versions of the 1000 started coming out. And then like a lot of other people have said, they kind of dropped the CoCo and went on to IBM compatibles. And that's what I did initially with Tandy machines and then branched out from there. It wasn't until maybe 10 years later that I started looking at the CoCo again. And that's when I got in touch with Boise and Mark Marlette from Cloud9. They were selling a lot of products and things for the CoCo, had a lot of email correspondence with both of them, and became a longtime customer of theirs. And then after some time, dropped out of it again, I would say until maybe about 4 years ago. And John, a lot of what you and Mike and Neil have done with the show, I was already back into it a little bit, but the show is what really got me interested in the CoCo again, enough where I attended my first CoCo Fest. And here to think that I've lived less than an hour from Chicago, and I never went all those years. But your show definitely persuaded me to do it. Been a happy member ever since of the CoCo community.
Cool, very exciting. It's always good to hear that we're having a certain amount of positive effect, and definitely bringing in people that we're happy to have. We're happy to have everyone, but so, like for example, I know you got excited about my video player project at one point. I think you're the only person that's actually pulled the code down and actually worked through any of it to make it work. You even went to the trouble to get a Super IDE card, if I'm not mistaken, or a Glensat IDE.
I did. I saw, I started going through videos on YouTube, just looking for different things CoCo related, and I came across one of the demos that you did at an earlier CoCo Fest, and I was blown away by that. And I'm like, okay, what do I need to do this? I saw that you had set up some stuff to do it in MAME, but you were showing real hardware. And I thought, all right, well, I got some stuff here. Maybe I can do this. And after I started looking into it, and I actually reached out to you via email, here we've never really corresponded, and you were very nice. You replied back to me. You kind of got me started on the right track looking at the code. And I thought, you know what? I was just hell-bent on getting that thing to work. And then when I realized I had to get an IDE controller, I thought, great, where am I going to get one of those? Because Cloud9 hasn't had their Super IDE in some time. So fortunately, I was able to dig up a Glenside controller, and that thing is an absolute monster. It looks like a tower coming out of an MPI.
Yeah.
And by the time you hook up that and the hard drive and everything else, I eventually wound up going compact flash just to try to save a little bit of space.
Sure.
You know, it took a little bit, and I'll tell you, having a little bit of Linux experience helped. Thanks to interacting with you back and forth, finally got it figured out. And to this day, I actually still have some documentation if anyone's ever interested on how to recreate this whole thing, and it seems to work. So I still think it's a great video player. The only thing that I would hope for, and it's just maybe beyond my skills right now, but I'm not dropping the idea of seeing files stream off a CoCo SDC.
Yeah,
because that player is really good.
Yeah, I should do that. In fact, the player is actually written with a sort of a driver concept, shall we say. And so it can actually target the VHD support that's in some of the emulators, as well as the Super IDE. And I should write one for the SDC. I think the SDC was, I guess all that stuff, that was a pretty long time ago. So I guess it was before the CoCo SDC even came about, or at least I didn't know about it. But yeah, I should definitely do that, one of many projects. It's always a little more attractive to do a new project than to patch up an old one, I guess.
I really enjoyed that video player. And now with you working on the MC10 basic compiler, so like you said, you have a lot of projects going on, but I hope you do revisit that video player sometime.
Yeah. Well, it's cool to see it. It's a nice little demo. It's if somebody has an idea of what's actually happening under the hood, then they're usually impressed. Unfortunately, it's the kind of thing that people are so used to now to seeing 4K resolution video all the time on their dinkiest computer they own. So people look at it and say, okay, so what? That's the worst video I've ever seen on a computer. And it's like, yeah, but the fact that this video at all is is really the point, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it. Back in the day, you never saw anything like that. I mean, and to think that you could still do it. I mean, okay, granted, there's a Glenside IDE controller involved, or the Cloud9 controller, but the computer's still doing the work. You get some pre-rendered frames, but it's still flipping through them and doing everything. And the audio and video quality is actually very, very good. So, very impressive project.
Well, I appreciate it.
And in sync. Yeah.
They do stay in sync.
Yeah, and I'd really like to see this month's hippie shaving video.
That would be funny. Yeah, I don't know if that's worth the CPU cycles to do the conversion, but
I may just try that. In fact, I'm going to jot that down so I don't forget.
That would be great.
But, you get involved in with the interesting project. It seems to be sort of your MO a little bit. You see a project that you want to know more about, and you actually get involved in it. So I know. So you've worked some on the Fusics or Fuzzics or whatever with Brett Gordon.
Yeah, most of my stuff is just breaking everything and making people frustrated. But actually, you know what? All these projects, quite a few of them do interest me. The CoCo Fest, the first one I went to, the 25th annual, got to meet a lot of these folks. Or was it the 25th annual is the first one. Brett was a real nice guy, and it was just interesting to see a project like, I don't want to say Linux, but I'll call it that for now, running on a color computer.
Yeah.
And he seemed real passionate about it, and I saw he was doing the CoCo 3 port, so I really wanted to see it work. I reached out to him, and he helped me get started with it, and Brett's, of course, done quite a bit with that particular port. Well, after working with him on that, I saw Tormod was doing stuff for the Dragon and the CoCo 2, along with some of the other hardware projects he's had, like his cartridge memory upgrade, the Sphinx board, and then, of course, that was revised into the new Moo board he's got. And, of course, that interests me as well. So between both Brett and Tormod, I told him, look, I got quite a bit of hardware here, or different variations of it. Let me do some testing. Let me poke around at this and provide feedback and everything else. So I'm not doing any coding. They're doing all the heavy lifting. But I like to help promote it. I like to use it, and I like to provide feedback. You could take that into the emulators as well. MAME, XROAR. I've always said I'm still a big fan of the hardware, the real hardware, but there's a lot of people that don't have it, and emulators are one of the next options for them. So I like to see the emulators do things the best they can. You try to beat them up the most you can, and fortunately for me, the MAME developers have been very open to the bug reports I've put in. Karen's been real good with XROAR. I've been giving him a lot of feedback on stuff. They're two great projects, so that's really good to see. But what's an interesting development now, as I look at these emulators, is the fact that there's so much new hardware coming into the scene, the CoCo world, that not all of it is emulated in emulators. So it's a strange kind of phenomena that you have so much new development going on with real CoCo stuff that the emulators just aren't even keeping up with it. And I think from a software development standpoint, which I think we're sorely lacking in the community, even though there's great efforts by a lot of people, there's just not enough to take advantage of this. And one thing that I always look at is, from a debugging standpoint, what can we do not only to get some of this new hardware emulated in the emulators, but also what can we do to make it easier for debugging on real hardware, not so much the emulator. So it's kind of there's two different sides to that.
Sure.
So,
and that's a project that somebody needs to take up probably, or of course, once you set something down and say, well, this is how you use the debugger, there'll be somebody that, well, that's stupid, we don't like that. There's always going to be the naysayer, right?
Yes, there's quite a bit of that in the community. A lot of differing opinions, but that's, to some point that's a strength, and other times it's you don't want to discourage people, but at the same time, you want to get feedback, good or bad. Otherwise, how do you make something better? So.
Right. Well, I definitely agree on the emulators. I just released a video today using demonstrating the use of some software to drive my Game Master cartridge. But the video is taken with XROAR, which now emulates the Game Master cartridge, and of course MAME has emulated the Game Master cartridge for a little bit longer, thanks to Tim Lindner. But still very nice to have those available for emulation, and there's a fair number of them available in the community, probably a few dozen that people have in their hands, but can't hurt to get more people out there with the tools to try some development. We just need to get them to do it. That's part of the reasoning. You mentioned the MC10 basic compiler I've been working on, which of course is for the MC10, but the guts of the compiler should not be hard to change the code that it generates to target the CoCo. That's just more worried about the guts of the compiler right now, trying to extend the language to where I want it. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk about that over the next few months or maybe even years. But that is kind of a nice segue. I think the regular hosts, we all use emulators to some degree for their utility, just because you can't always have a machine with you, or sometimes it's just nice to take your laptop and go sit outside, or sit in your favorite easy chair to work on something rather than sitting at your CoCo kiosk or whatever. But I don't think any of us, not even Neil, are super duper really into the emulation scene. Whereas I think you're probably closer, so that's part of why we're bringing you on, for that extra perspective. And so I know you did a lengthy talk talking about doing some emulation not too long ago, and that's sort of what made me think to invite you on to our team. So I guess what I'm getting at is I'm hoping that you'll help us with fleshing out our skill gap or whatever in the emulation world.
Oh, I mean, I would absolutely be happy to. And the whole thing with emulation, and even the Raspberry Pi, that whole project was just started because I had a extra CoCo 3 case sitting on a shelf, and I had a keyboard, and I didn't have a motherboard for it, I didn't have a power supply for it, and I thought, what can I do with this? And a lot of people were already jumping on the Raspberry Pi bandwagon. went ahead and looked for some distributions. I saw there was a project called RetroPie that did bundled a lot of emulators, and of course there was XRoar, old version of it, and even MAME. But what I found is they weren't running real current versions of these things, and the performance was really bad. And I don't know, I just kind of got sidetracked with it. I wanted to see if I could put a new version of both emulators on there and get it to run right, and ultimately just throw it in a case. Now, none of this stuff is new. People like Chris Hawks has had a Raspberry Pi in a CoCo case for quite some time. He was nice enough to share the project with everybody about how he interfaced a keyboard to the Raspberry Pi using a Teensy controller. I went ahead and did one of those. And then I started looking at other resources to try to find ways to get the Raspberry Pi to run a current version of MAME and XRoar. And that led into, well, as long as I'm doing this, I wonder if anyone else might be interested. There's a lot of people out there that aren't familiar with Linux. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do this in a GUI, but I'd be happy to set up a simple menu, put some predefined scripts on there, and just share it and just see what happened. And, there's been some interest in it. I've always said I don't take credit for any of this. This is all pieces of things that a lot of other people have done in the community. But it has led me to meet new people in the community, develop some relationships with them, and just generally learn more about the CoCo and different things. And it's been a cool learning experience, and I'm always willing to help, anybody I can with this.
So for example, mentioning how we observed you jumping in where people have kind of left projects and kind of picking them up and carrying them. I guess you recently took some of Chris Hawk's, at least his papers or whatever, and sort of republish them, talking about the interfacing the CoCo keyboard to the Pi and getting the Pi into the CoCo case.
Yeah, there was somebody on Facebook that was asking, and he was asking about it, and I found the old article that Chris had published with the Glenside Computer Club, and I went ahead and forwarded that to him, and he was able to recreate the same thing. It's a neat project. I mean, keyboards are just in great demand, working keyboards. So it's not like a lot of people have extra keyboards in a case where they can just throw a Raspberry Pi in it. I mean, I would not gut one of my working CoCos to do this. I just happen to have those couple extra parts. But yeah, there's been some other projects and things I tend to look at, like David Ladd. He does a lot of things on the side with regards to Nitrous 9 and Curtis Boyle. When I was able to get a CoCo VGA board, for example, from Brendan, I was very interested to see the 64 column mode, and working with David and Curtis, they don't have those boards. They don't have CoCos that are compatible with the current CoCo VGAs that were out, but I did. So that was something on the side where they would send me code updates. I would set up webcam shares, and we would have, hour-long sessions here and there during the evenings. And that's how they finally got the level 1 stuff working. And a lot of that was based on the work that Boise had done. Boise actually had gotten the CoCo VGA 64 column mode to work in level 1. They just wanted to carry it over to the current Nitrous 9 repo. And now there's other people that have that. So I think Brett's been working on a little bit of stuff with the CoCo VGA, so I'll be testing that. He's kind of getting himself involved with the CoCo 2 port now. So yeah, anybody that's got projects, I mean, I can't get into everything, but I am willing to help test where I can, as long as I got some hardware. One last thing with David Ladd, he did the RS-232 pack project where he modified a version of HDB DOS to work with that in DriveWire. So people that have a CoCo 1 or a CoCo 2, if they wanted to run at the higher baud rates, that's another thing that I helped test with him, and everybody's been great to work with. So I try to just stay in the background. Again, these are all the successes of others. I'm just helping doing some testing.
So, Ron, do you think you'll have an emulation corner or sort of regular piece that you'd like to produce for the show?
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, if there's enough interest in it, and it sounds like there might be, I would be happy to do it. Maybe starting out with something like XRoar, or just gauging interest. I mean, I could certainly reach out to a few folks as well. But if there's interest in learning more about how to set up the emulator, how some of the command line things work, and let me just say too, you had mentioned Tim Lindner. He did that great interview. Actually, he'd had that presentation on your show a while back with the speech
right.
and sound cartridge. I thought that was a fantastic thing he did. That was extremely entertaining. Tim and I have exchanged emails many times in the past, and he's very familiar with MAME. Obviously, he does MAME development. So he's been another great person to work with on this. I get asked questions all the time about command line options, things like that. Yeah, I'd be happy to have a segment if it's something that people are interested in. I'm happy to do it.
Well, I suspect that people would love to have whatever you'd be able to produce, and anything from step 1 type XROAR, step 2 type dash whatever. I'm sure they'd love to have anything from that to any kind of clever hacks or usefulness that you can pull out of it, or ways to combine different tools together, or even ways to set up development flows or whatever. Anyway, I'm sure the people would love to hear any number of things. What I find is people don't always know what they want to hear next. Sometimes the best parts are just whatever you want to talk about, and whether people knew they wanted to hear about it or not.
One of the things that I get told about a lot is, hey, this isn't working or this isn't working. And I'm not generally, just a generic MAME support person, but I do try to help where I can. And I find that some people have found some legitimate bugs. The one thing that I would, and maybe we'll save this for a segment, but the one thing that I would tell people is you can be discouraged. You can be critical of a project like MAME or whatever all you want. But one of the best things you can do is, if you found a legitimate bug, is submit a bug report. No guarantees that the devs are going to get to it right away, but I found for the most part they're very responsive, and I've been helping people understand how to get over to the MAME bug tester site and submit bug reports. And a lot of times they get around to fixing them. So we'll save that for maybe a segment.
Yeah, I think filing a bug report for MAME or whatever is probably a good piece to think about doing.
Yeah, it's the only way you're going to make the product better. You got to let them know about it.
So at the risk of opening a can of worms, so we mentioned MAME, we mentioned XROAR. There is at least one other emulator out there that retains a lot of popularity, despite some known shortcomings, shall we say. Maybe not that well known, but I know about them, or some of them. What do you think about...
VCC?
VCC, there you go. Well, what do you think about OVCC now that it's open? Seems like they're making good progress on some of the API changes to get it to a more open code base. But do you have any thoughts on that project? It seems like there's basically one guy doing the work there. Of course, there's basically one guy working on XROAR too, and I'd say from a support perspective, they're in leagues apart. So.
Yeah,
anyway.
VCC, I think is still a very popular emulator. A lot of people do not want to mess, just as I said, a lot of people like to mess with command lines. I think there's about triple the amount that don't want to mess with command lines. They want a GUI. And MAME does provide one, but it's not custom tailored like VCC is. And even with all the shortcomings of VCC, that's been taken over by another person who's now, like you said, going to port it over to multiple platforms. I would love to see it run under Linux. I'm a huge Linux fan. I'm not saying that makes it better, but I think it opens it up to others. But it does need some of the, I don't want to say bugs, but some of the emulation issues that it's had just in general with regards to CoCo. If those are going to be addressed as well, it's another good project. I hope that the person working on it now continues with it, and it sounds like they are. So I would be happy to look at it. I don't think it would ever run under something like the Raspberry Pi right now. I am still interested in getting a lot of that stuff to run on the Raspberry Pi, but that would probably require X Windows and things, and that's just not something from a performance standpoint that would probably work very well right now.
If he targets SDL, well, there should be a SDL frame buffer driver, so I would think that would make it a Raspberry Pi target. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah. And without getting too much into it, you bring up a great point with that too. So I've talked to Karen about, XOR, and obviously that's what we're doing with XOR. There's no X Windows with it when I use it on the Raspberry Pi. However, what you do lose is some of his menu options, like I want to mount a new disk in the machine. There are a lot of shortcut keys, but there's nothing for that. And I found some creative ways through scripting to get around that thing. And I think that those are the type of challenges that you'll see with VCC. If you're going to have a frame buffer, are you going to provide a virtual menu with it within that frame buffer? A lot of people are unaware of the fact that the main project actually has some hooks in it where you can have on-screen displays, even if you're not running under X, where you can actually display the debugger right over the main window. That is something I'm actually trying to get to work within the Raspberry Pi environment, but that's been quite the challenge. So
cool. Well, it just sounds like right here we're digging up a lot of possible things for you to talk to us about. A lot of possible features in the next few months. It sounds great.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it.
What do you think you want to do to put your mark on the CoCo crew?
Oh boy, put me on the spot here. That's a great question. I'm hoping I can offer maybe some additional counterpoints maybe to some things that you guys talk about. So much of what you talk about interests me. I'm hoping I can provide maybe a different perspective on it as more of an end user rather than a developer.
Mm-hmm.
I hope to promote the show. I hope to keep other people interested in the community through maybe some actions on the side like I've already been doing. I'm not necessarily a developer, but there's a lot of motivation to do it. I mean, in my job, I do quite a bit on the CoCo side. BASIC was what I programmed in many years ago. That's why this compiler that you're working on is very interesting to me. I think it's going to be a great project because, from my point of view, for people that do want to do development, that may want to take advantage of things like the GMC cartridge and somehow make a mark with a product that they can do, BASIC is a great entry-level language to do it. If people can write something in BASIC, which may seem easier than doing it in assembly, and yet gain some performance out of it through a compiler like you're working on, I'm hoping that really opens up the doors for people to pursue a game or whatever they want to do. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the emulators. Whether it's going to be played on a real CoCo or not, the emulators provide one of the best ways to do debugging. I think all those things go together. So.
Yep, definitely. And then making sure that the new compiler, when it gets to the CoCo, can target ROM cartridges, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Because this is the one true way to release games, as we all know.
Well, I'll tell you, whether or not we see that in the CoCo side, I can tell you in some of the other retro communities, cartridges are extremely popular. Not only the cartridges, but the restoration of them and making new labels for them and just everything else and how you present them in however you want to showcase them. So not just from a playing standpoint, but just from a collector standpoint. I'm not sure why it's not that way in the CoCo world. We had plenty of cartridges, but it definitely is that way in other communities.
Yeah, definitely. Other communities have definitely embraced. I mean, some of those we're talking about machines that only had cartridges anyway. But I think even on some of the other home computers or whatever, I think cartridges have been strongly embraced. Hoping to see us continuing. There are people who are happy to have cartridges in the CoCo. There's plenty of them. Certainly built enough cartridges to maybe not want them to be too much more popular because I can only solder so many things. But definitely a little bit of an anomaly in the community. But that can probably be a long-term discussion in some other forum too. But so Ron, if for some reason someone came and took all your CoCo stuff but left everything else you had, in terms of retro gear, what would be your next favorite machine?
I don't know. The only other retro machines I got are a TI-99 because I did get one of those when I was a kid when they were like in that fire. I think they went down to $49 at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually worked. So another story, maybe for another time. I actually worked at a Service Merchandise. I'm not sure if you guys remember those stores.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was before Tandy or before Radio Shack. I was 17, and I was working in their sight and sound department. And as you guys may remember, that store used to carry a lot of the old 8-bit machines, the Commodores, the Ataris. So I had to sell a lot of that stuff. And I was never, I don't know how it came to be. It's been mentioned in other discussions about how if you were a Radio Shack guy and a CoCo guy, that the 6809 was king and the 6502 was crap. And that got bred into me too. So every time I looked at one of those machines, I was like, probably just through the power of persuasion, I just didn't like them. Just in the last year and a half, I picked up a TI just for sentimental values and realize now just how terrible its basic was. And the whole machine is just architected so damn weird. I mean, there's some cool peripherals now, modern stuff for it. And there's a little bit of a community for it, but I'll tell you, it is not really a great machine, at least not my opinion. But I have it. It looks kind of cool, not the white one, but the old black with the aluminum or stain, whatever it was on there. And then I wound up getting I never owned an Atari other than like a 2600 back in the day, and I wound up getting an 800 XL. It was sold as defective. It really actually just worked. I don't know. They must not have turned it on. And I've been learning a little bit about it. There are some things I like about it, other things I don't. I've really come to appreciate the CoCo more. So John, if everyone took, all my CoCo stuff was gone, well, would the MC10 stay? Let me ask you that. That's not really.
Well, yeah. Well, let's say they're snobs and left the MC10 behind.
Yeah.
They left it propping opening the door or whatever.
Yeah, that wouldn't be enough for me to make the MC10 my favorite just yet. I do like that machine, by the way. I would right now, because the only other experience I have with the machine is the Atari. I'd probably just have to say that, but I would go looking for the people that took them, and I don't know what I would do. So.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Well, we've been talking to Ron Klein, and we're all going to hear a lot more of Ron as he joins us as a regular host in future episodes. Ron, thanks for talking to us. And
thanks for having me, guys.
Definitely, and I think you're going to make the show a better piece of entertainment. Yeah, there we go.
Absolutely. Glad to have you aboard.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to cut here, hear from our sponsors, and then we'll be back with the rest of the show.
Tuesday on CoCo TV, we're back with everyone's favorite off-the-wall Radio Shack store manager.
260518.
When are you going to be finished with this inventory? I want you to take me out tonight.
260528. 260532.
More like 26-dog.
An outrageous new 103 Main Street. Then join Miss Wilson as she teaches America's most unruly 6th grade computer class.
Today, we are going to be talking about the order of operations. Oh, what a wonderful display of gestures. Now, there are 4 operations.
It's a brand new Metro City Elementary, right after 103 Main Street. Tuesdays on CoCo TV.
Welcome back to Neil's Corner on episode 39. I almost didn't make it this month because I got hit with a nasty flu. But the good news is I'm feeling much better, and I'm just going to make it in time for this month's recording. So I apologize in advance if my voice doesn't sound quite right or a little bit gravelly. I was going to do a follow-up this month and review Gnome's Quest 2, but when we talked about FuriousFelines 2 in the news segment earlier on the show, I just knew I had to do a review on this one first. What caught my eye is how amazing the graphics are and the use of colors in this game. And to top it off, the game is coded in BASIC, only with the exception of a few machine language routines. It is coded by a fellow named Diego Barrizo. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And he had the help of Paul Thayer for the assembly language routines needed. This game was never really supposed to be. The story behind it was Diego was busy updating and fixing FuriousFelines Part 1. However, due to adding a lot of new features, he decided to make this one Part 2. And so, FuriousFelines 2 is born. Oh wait, let me say the full title. FuriousFelines 2 Cut the Cheese. No. I mean FuriousFelines 2 Save the Cheese. Got Boise's line still in my head. This game requires a Color Computer 3 with a minimum of 128K of memory, which you should all have because that's what they came with stock. The game uses a keyboard for control, so a joystick is not needed. It allows you to select for composite if you're using a TV or RGB if you're using a monitor. Something to note here. I like Diego how he worded it. In the game, you can select RGB/VGA. because nowadays lots of people are using VGA monitors on their CoCo 3 thanks to the plethora of VGA options we now have in the community. The object of this game is simple. You want to help the cats catch the mouse before they eat the cheese. It sounds simple, but you must first figure out the right amount of cats to pile up against the left wall to make the proper jump to the right and land on the mouse before it starts eating the cheese. To make it even more difficult, you must consider the wind and weight of the cats to get a perfect score. When starting the game out, you select the type of cat you want by pressing 1 to 3. Your choices are a tabby, short hair, or Siamese, basically ranging from heaviest to lightest. There's also a wind meter at the top left-hand corner of the screen, so you can keep an eye on that for basing on how heavy of a cat you want to select. This game is super fun, and it does have different levels and keeps a high score. Oh, and did I mention? It's programmed in BASIC. Really amazes me what can be pulled off in BASIC on our beloved CoCo 3. I'm going to make a bold statement and say our retro computer we love has one of the best, if not the best, BASIC for any 8-bit computers of this era. Now, I'm sure I'm definitely going to catch some flack for that statement. I'll make sure to get Diego's website added in the show notes so you can all download a copy and enjoy this game. Also, one other quick thing to mention. While you are on his website, be sure to spend at least a few minutes and check it out. I really like his format, as he went with the original CoCo font and green screen. It's very well done. I also enjoyed reading the write-up on this game. Diego goes on to explain what each file does, and even what some of the programming line numbers mean in the game. Well, thank you for listening to my segment, and now you've got another game for your CoCo 3 to enjoy. Game on, and CoCo forever.
You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast.
Well, it's that time again. We have reached the end of episode 39. Another full episode for your listening pleasure. I'd like to thank our usual folks here, John Linville, for once again providing an amazing tech segment and procuring all those news articles you hear each month. I'd definitely like to thank Mike Rowan for doing all the editing and all the sound bites and commercials you hear on the show each month. And I'd also like to thank Boise Pete for being a part of the show. I think it's pretty safe to say he's full-time here now. Great to have you. And I'd also like to thank Ron Klein for loaning us some of your time to record an interview with you this month. I'd personally like to thank you for all you do in the community and helping everybody out. And I'm not just saying that because you did give me a Tandy 1000 keyboard. No, what you do is great, and we definitely appreciate it. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you for listening to us each month. Keep your feedback coming in. We like to hear from you. And until next month, CoCo forever.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo. 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 CoCo.
Dance like there's no tomorrow.
What is this crazy rock and roll music anyway? It's a blast from the past.
Dance, dance, dance. Dance, dance, dance.
Wanna go Bye.